Hello, fellow lifelong learners. My name's Erin Rathke. Thank you very much for joining me for my live stream. Now, we'll see how we go in relation to all the working parts for this particular broadcast, because I only just installed this afternoon. So it could be a little bit interesting because right now what you're seeing, and if you notice a little bit of a delay between my speech and the mic, is I'm running the software as my webcam for this presentation window, but the microphone's being picked up as my mic device. So you're not actually seeing my webcam right now. You're seeing it as it runs through the software, which looks like this with this lovely presentation background. Before we get too far into it, I would like to do an acknowledgement of country. I respect and honour Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge the stories, traditions and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples on this land and the lands in Australia that I reach, and commit to building a brighter future together. So, I am always looking for ways to try to make presentations more engaging, more interesting. Like a lot of adult trainers who train adults, as well as being an adult myself, well, most of the time, there is a lot of content that you have to deliver that can often be pretty dry. And when content is dry and visually not very interesting, it gets really hard for people to maintain their focus, especially in an age where, you know, we've got TikTok and filters and like things that just make things really pop and are visually really stunning. I mean, to try to help me keep my concentration in my own work environment, I've set up, soundboards to help muffle the noise in my own office that look like giant flowers. Like I really, really like things to be visually interesting with a lot of color, as the selection of what you can see around you right now is pretty indicative of, right? So with this particular software, I was put onto it by one of my colleagues while it was just available for Macs, and the Windows beta for the software by All Turtles has become available this week. So I've popped it onto my computer and I had a little bit of a look around, but then figured it would sort of be like a digital unboxing, where before I get too far into it, I would actually set up the very, very basic stuff, find some controls, and then we could explore it together. So let's just see if I've got this figured out, because I've spent about 20 minutes trying to make sure that everything's working really nicely. So I'm going to flip through some of the screens, and then we'll actually look at the software interface for and see how it works. So first of all, when you first install and load the software, it provides you with a really, really simple branded slide deck for you to start experimenting with. So I'll just pop that up, mirroring the webcam, pop it up here. So there's this little welcome monster with this little box, which is pretty cool. As you can see there, you can have content that's projected up onto the screen with different aspect ratios. So we've got a square one here. Then we've got something in 16:9. And these are just JPEGs. Like, you can make whatever slides you like. I tend to use Google Slides a lot for my broadcast for this show. So what you can do is, when you're creating a slide deck in there, you can actually create the slides that you want and then download them from Google Slides in a range of different file formats, and you can load them into this software. So there's the square format again, going back to widescreen. There's my thumbnail from earlier. My acknowledgement of country, obviously, and my titles for this show. And I don't want to create video inception by sharing the screen that I'm looking at over here. So what I'm going to do is, over in my broadcast software, StreamYard, that I, as I mentioned, am using as the webcam source for, I'm going to flip it over so you can actually look at the software and we can have a bit of a look together, okay? So there we are. So as you can see, now you can actually see the software layout. Now, if you can just make out my cursor there, that's the border that my computer is outputting as my webcam source right now. And you can see the controls run across the bottom of the screen. So here's those different options that I was flicking through before. And here are my preloaded slides that I added, that I created and then downloaded as, I think some of them are JPEGs. Some of them, I'll just double check. Yeah, some of them are PNGs. Like this is my thumbnail that I created for this broadcast that you can see here. That's a PNG that I created in Adobe Spark after using another piece of software that I'm a big fan of called Snagit to create this image. And then I used that background there. And then I took a screenshot of myself pointing at that. And then I loaded that screenshot as an image up into Adobe Spark Post and added the credits and created my thumbnail for this broadcast. So like a few different bits of software being used there to create something that I thought would look really, really nice and quite visually appealing. As far as thumbnails go, we've got so much competition now. There's so much content. It's always good to have something that just goes, ah. So that's the basic layout that they were working with there. So to add a new slide, it's pretty easy. You can manage them fairly simply. You just go new slide and you can either add media like I've got here, where I've actually got my screen that I want to share sitting over there. So say for instance, I'll just show you how that works. So I go add screen share. It gives me the option to look at what monitors I've got available, and I will just pop up that particular monitor. So if I was to add that into the broadcast, and it'll look a little interesting. There it is. So you can see there, that's the other window I have open where I am sharing my logo, and that's actually the slide deck that I've created for this broadcast previously with a few little things. And to download those and make them available for here, all I did was go File, Download, and then I chose, you can do either JPEG or PNG, it doesn't seem to matter. And once you've grabbed your slide that you want to export, you just download that to your computer, and it's popped it across to there. So what I would do to actually add that into my broadcast, I'll just flick it back over to that one, is I go to the bottom left-hand corner of the screen and go New Slide, Add Media. And then it has a little moment where it pulls all of my downloads out. You don't want to see how messy my download folder is. It's kind of crazy. But you see it just at the edge there. So I've got a few different things in there, and I'm just going to select that slide that I just downloaded and click Open. And now you can see over here that's been added to the software, and it'll just flip it out in the background. Now, you also may have noticed in order to create a little bit of visual interest, the slides aren't actually showing like completely like front on square. They're kind of giving that little bit of a shifted perception where it kind of gives the broadcast a little bit of depth of field. So those sort of settings are available all the way over here on the right-hand side. So you've got your slides, which appear here, and you can turn those slides on and off. You can make them full screen. As you can see, it's doing an okay job of cutting me out from my background. Not too shabby, but you've got the 3 different settings there for how the slides actually display. And then over here, you've actually got on the right-hand side, you've got the settings for your rooms. So it comes preloaded with a whole bunch of different visualizations that you can customize ever so slightly. Say, for instance, with this one, if I want to keep myself on the right-hand side of the screen, I can do so, and I can grab the slides and pull them around, or I can pull myself around and change the config of where everything's sitting. So then I can try to orient myself so that I'm looking at the slides when I'm actually looking at the preview screen right down there. The other layouts that they have preloaded in here are quite visually stunning. So they give you a fairly good range of things to look at from the get-go, but there's also a whole bunch of extra rooms, some of which I've preloaded in here, that have some pretty cute options like this one. Now, if I wanted to modify the way that shows on the broadcast, then what I would do is I would actually select the little, and it's really hard to make out, but if you can see my cursor wiggling on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a little gear stick, a little gear, I should say. So if I left click on that, it opens out the slide options there, and you have the option to modify the rooms or the presenter. So let's click over into presenter, because I want myself to just be a little bit easier to see. So we can make me disappear or reappear. We can change how big I am. Don't want to mess with their template too much because it's pretty nifty. You can change the shape of it, which really will mess with this template. So you can have the cutout like I had earlier. You can have a square background, or you can have the little circle, which fits very cutely into this magic ball. And then if you go over to effects, you actually have a range of different effects that you can choose from. Now, my personal favorite at this stage is this one. It's a very flattering effect filter that they've got on there. It gives you nice skin tone. Nobody's going to complain about having nicer skin tone, right? So, but if we flick through the different options there, they have some fairly interesting ones. So if you wanted to do this to add some visual interest to your own presentations, that's absolutely an option. But it being school holidays and there being lots of digital projects and bibs and bobs that people might be interested in using to give their young people at home some stimulation, then there are lots of options through here where they could make a little story. We'll just flick through some more of those options there. So you can sort of see there's a lot going on that you could experiment with and have a bit of fun with. So that's the presenter thing. We'll just go back to the rooms as well. We'll pop out of Crystal Ball and we'll look at some of the ones that I quickly threw together today. So you would have noticed earlier, I started off with this particular one. Pop that back and I'll drag myself back over here to give myself a slightly nicer layout. Hi. And but if you're not so color centric like me and don't love the beautiful bokeh effect of the slightly blurred lights in the background, you want something a little bit more simple and elegant, you can load some images if something in the comprehensive library doesn't tickle your fancy. And you can do that by going in and utilizing some of the products that I've actually demonstrated in some of my live streams before, websites like Unsplash and Pixabay, where they have some Creative Commons images that are available for you to use and use for free and use without credit. Though you can see I kind of like giving credit where credit is due to people when I use their beautiful artwork. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll just pull up the information on the website. So here we have the About Us, which I've linked in the video description for the mmhmm app. We also have this lovely background by PublicDomainPictures that I found on Pixabay by using the search terms background bright. I simply hit the download button on that one. There's also one that I created that I think is pretty cool, which is by this person, DESIGNECOLOGIST. I'll just show it briefly because I downloaded it and then realized that it had a little bit of interesting hidden slightly adult content on the image. So what I did was I downloaded her image. I think it's a her, judging from the thumbnail. And I dropped it into this environment, and I'll just move myself out of the way. Wait a second. Let's see if we can do this. Hi. So she had in here a mug that had some little bit of suggestive imagery on the mug. It was pretty abstract, but yeah, some people may not like it. So I just went in, downloaded this image, cropped it a little bit because her picture was beautiful and I love the colors, but it was centered, which doesn't really work very well if I want to use it as a presentation platform. So I cropped it to make it slightly off center. I grabbed this and I actually put it over the top of the image that she had displayed on her computer there. Left it nice and squared on. And there was also, I noticed, a photograph that was on the desktop in this particular image that looked like it showed somebody at a personal event. So I just quickly grabbed the blur tool and snag it, covered up that coffee mug branding that was sitting there, and covered up that image that showed two people, just because I'm not going to pretend that they're endorsing my show. And yeah, I think it's just a little bit of a good idea if you're using images just to try to give them a bit of a critical eye, just to make sure that the content that is in them is appropriate for what you want to use them for and appropriate for the audience that you're going to be presenting to. So yeah, that's a custom background. So I didn't have to change the angles on the presentation at all, which was really good. But if I wanted to, then I could have changed both the vertical tilt. Say, for instance, if this computer wasn't quite as beautifully squared on for the purposes of what I'm using it for as it is. But then there's also the vertical tilt. So say, for instance, if you went online and you searched for a computer on desk image, and you see how that one's just that little bit askew. It might not be perfect for what we're looking for, but if we were to grab that and give credit to Lukas Bieri, click that free download button. And if I was signed in, I wouldn't get that recapture, but I'm not at the moment, so I'll just pull that down. We'll copy that to make sure we include it in the show credits later. And now we've got that image, let's pull it into the software. So we're going to add a new slide. We're gonna, oh no, wrong one. This is the fun thing about learning as you go. So we want to go to more rooms, and it opens up a menu that shows us lots of featured ones. And there are some absolutely gorgeous background here. Like, it's just absolutely crazy how many really, really great backgrounds people have already added in here. But I'm going to add my own. And I want to grab that folder, and I'm going to drag and drop it from my downloads folder into this workspace. So I just need that window for my downloads folder, just grabbing that in the background. And I'm going to drag and drop that image across, and you see it's already populated really, really fast, hey? And now that it's been added in that menu, if I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see it has now appeared at the bottom right-hand side of that menu. So if I click on that now, it isn't quite set up for what I need. So I'm going to pull myself over here, sit up a bit so that red flower stops decorating the top of my head. And I'm going to grab this, more or less drag it into position, pull it around a little bit to try to match it up a bit. more than it currently is. Don't need to get it perfect. We just need to get it close enough so that it sits within the edges. And we are going to grab that little gear and we are going to change the vertical tilt. And then pull that size down a little bit. And we're just going to mod it until it sits and it isn't quite so Star Wars credity. Oh, it's pretty good. I mean, obviously the aspect ratio on this image isn't quite right for the slides, but you get the general idea, right? So yeah, it's the difference that like a quick crop will make. Make sure that it's 1920 by 1080, otherwise so it doesn't get squished. You can just make out there that coffee cup is looking a little tiny bit squished. So that's something that I have already done with the other backgrounds. I played with this and exported it and changed it a couple of times after cropping it just to make sure that that area sat really nicely over the front of that. So it basically looks like it's really there. So with the presenter as well, I mentioned before that there are the different options. So depending on what you're demonstrating, you could actually really get some good effects by utilizing the borders to their full potential with this software, which is really, really good. I'm quite partial to the cutout thing, especially if you can kind of scale yourself so that you nearly look like you're in the room relative to the presentation that you're looking at. That is very effective. Wait a second. Not that way, that way. There we go. So that sort of thing takes a little bit of practice. And obviously, as I play with this a little bit more, I've got a free trial at the moment. The licensing on this particular software is quite interesting. And actually, let's pull that up now. Given that this is a Windows beta, I wouldn't be surprised if some more features do get rolled out. But at the moment, I'm just taking advantage of the 7-day free trial. But I do notice on their website at the moment, it says that the free version of this allows you 60 minutes access per day. So if you were planning on doing some presentations, especially some shorter ones, and you wanted to create a little bit more engagement with it, especially if you wanted to mess around with things like, being able to utilize that those room properties and change it so that it has that different horizontal and vertical tilt. If you know exactly what you want to say and exactly how you want to say it, you could definitely utilize this software to be able to create those presentations just using the freeware version if you felt so inclined. Otherwise, there is also the premium option, which I see here is $8.33 a month billed annually. And then there's also that business one that looks a bit interesting. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed having a bit of a play with this software today. And I also really, really appreciate you coming in and having a look at it with me. Just quickly check the chat just to see if anyone has joined in and has asked any questions. Doesn't look like it. So that is very cool and absolutely fine. One thing I haven't looked at is the menu system on the left-hand side. The layout of it is a little interesting because you've got the Logitech StreamCam, which is what I'm using, and I've chosen that as my input rather than the built-in webcam on my computer. And then at the top left-hand side, you've got the main menu of the software where you can actually add your slide media just like you can down here, go through the presenter tools just like you can over here, go through the different room options. It's got like the written menu rather than the very visual menu that sits over here on the right-hand side. So I noticed that they've duplicated a lot of their menus, and I could only imagine that they're doing that because they want to make it work well and have it as accessible for as many users who think differently as possible. You'll also notice here that Although my Logitech StreamCam does do a fairly good job of finding the edges with the right software and cutting me out as it has now. You can see it isn't completely perfect. If I bring my hands up, it either cuts them off or it adds a little bit of the background imagery in. But there is also the option to have a green screen set up. I do have a green screen mat. I'm not going to rearrange my entire office to try to set that up right now. And you can also see that it allows you to flick through all of the tabs. I don't know how much I would actually end up using those shortcuts because I find this interface incredibly easy to use. And then obviously you also have your account details. So when you set up, you will need to nominate a username and password to set everything up. It doesn't seem to offer any sort of multi-factor authentication at the moment, which is cool. Like, that's fine. But when you're going through, it also looks like you can manage multiple accounts. So say, for instance, if you become a bit of a fan of this software and you manage to get it into your budget, if you work in an educational institution, it looks as though you can actually switch between accounts within the software. So if you have a work account and a personal free account, which is very convenient, it's a lot better than having to constantly sign yourself out and then back in and then go check what that password is that you set for yourself. But yeah, I'm pretty impressed with it right now. I'm actually thinking about what kind of presentations we have coming up where we might be able to utilize this kind of software. And yeah, I really enjoy something that just, it's amazing the difference that can come from just being able to modify the backgrounds and tweak just the angle and the size so easily. Within StreamYard, we have, for our broadcast that we do for Inject Creativity Live, it's really, really good because it has multiple layouts that you can utilize where it looks quite effective, as you can see here. But it's always good to have that ability, that little bit more of an option to actually grab the edges of things and pull them around just to make things larger or smaller based on what you want to emphasize and what you want to see during your presentation. So I think that's a good place to leave it. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop something in the comments for this video. Like, share, and subscribe if you're looking for something to give your presentations that extra little bit of pop. And if I don't do another live stream beforehand, I will see you at the next Inject Creativity Live, which is in 2 weeks' time over on the Adobe for Education channel with Tim Kitchen and Jerry Wong. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great evening, and I will see you around.